Hello, my name is Kevin Fry. I'm a longtime historian of Andersonville National Historic Site. Today we're commemorating the 150th anniversary of the entrance of the first prisoners to arrive at Andersonville in Stockade. Today is February 25th, 2014, which is the 150th anniversary of the arrival of those prisoners. Looking behind me, we'll see that there is the Andersonville train depot, which is not the original depot. This one was brought from, if memory serves, Mock, Georgia in the 1970s. However, it is the location of the original depot. So quite a small depot with just a loading dock. The residence here was only about 20. The train bed that the rails, the trains are still active on today. It's the original train bed, of course. There's been modifications with new train service and that type of thing, but it is the original location. What we're going to do today is we're going to commemorate this day by walking to the prison roughly in the same path that the prisoners would have taken. The National Park Service, as far as I know, has no plans to do such a thing today. However, they're going to, I think, this weekend, which doesn't really make sense to me. I can't imagine celebrating or commemorating Gettysburg on July 10th or Chickamauga on August 15th, or even the Civil Rights Marches to Selma a week after it actually happened. But we're going to follow this route, which is my way of paying tribute to the prisoners that were here. Again, this is the small town of Andersonville. We look at off in the distance is the Henry Worth Monument. This isn't to offend anybody. I know some people are touchy about that, but I'm just showing the location of the site that we're at, and we're going to start walking toward the prison now. So the prisoners arrived here on the night before, on February 24th, and because it was after dark, it was thought better to just wait till the following morning to bring the prisoners to the prison site itself. So 500 of them roughly arrived here from Belle Island in Virginia, in Richmond, after spending several days in cattle cars, being transported here to a better location, away from the cold, the winter that was up in Richmond at the time. And many of them look forward to what was promised of them to be a much better location, warmer climate, better food supply sources further away from the war, etc. Keeping in mind, this is the path that some 45,000 Union prisoners of war will follow in the next 14 months. There was a guard force here of several thousand that also suffered casualties of the same diseases as the prisoners. There was more than 200 of these guards that died here as a result of the prison and disease. Now, from the location of the depot, when they got off the train, because the area was so covered with heavy pine that was forested for the building of the prison site, you could have seen the prison from this vantage point. It was a long dirt road, and off in the distance, it won't take us too long to get there. There was a very good book written about Andersonville that carried the title of 800 Paces to Hell, which commemorates the walk really in its own wording of the title. Now, one thing to note off to the right here, which is where the Andersonville water supply is pumped, there was a smaller stockade that was built for Confederate officers that had been disciplined and whatnot, and it was quickly turned over and used as Union officers. There's a placard here that memorializes the location. There were about 65 officers held here, and that was for just a very short time until they were transferred to the officers' prison in Macon, Georgia, that carried the name of Camp Oglethorpe. Among the first prisoners that arrived here was a young lad who was in the 2nd New York Cavalry by the name of Adam Swarner. He arrived here on the first day and died 2 days later, being the first of nearly 13,000 prisoners that would die here. Several months later in May, his brother Adam also passed away and is buried in the National Cemetery. I'm sorry, I said his brother Adam. His brother's name was David. Correction, I've lost my mind. Jacob, grade 1004, 1005. As we're walking here, I can't help but think of the solitude these men were in, the mental states. While they were with their fellow soldiers, they certainly felt alone, wondering what would bring about the exchanges, if they would ever happen again, or if this might be their last walk that they would ever take. And for nearly 13,000 it was. After crossing the highway, we're entering Andersonville Prison Park. Off in the distance through the gates, you can see some monuments up on the hill. And again, at this point, the prisoners would have been able to see where their destination was. When the prisoners first arrived here, the stockade wasn't even complete. The section between the north and the south gate was still open and had several cannon trained on it for control. This is basically the starting point of the failure in the operation. Over to our left, as we enter the site, within this tree line there are a number of sunken areas that appear to be graves, but they're not. This is where the Georgia reserves were encamped, and those sunken areas were where the soldiers had built small two-man log cabins. Looking up on the hill, we can see to the left the Wisconsin Monument, Rhode Island. The one with the ball on top is Massachusetts. The tall one is Ohio. Next to it is Tennessee. And then to the right of it is a common memorial stone for several states, the smaller states that don't have individuals here, such as Vermont, Maryland, Kansas Territory. Off to our right is the prison, the reconstructed north gate, and a section of the wall. Now, this was rebuilt about 20 years ago. They did an archaeological dig so they could see exactly where the footprint was left of the walls that were here. And that, along with diagrams and maps, could build a model of what the gates and what the prison wall actually looked like. The prisoners were separated into groups of about 90, and at this point they were explained the very few rules that were here and which they were to follow. Looking to the south, we see the pavilion built over Providence Spring, and off in the distance you see two small pillars. That was the location of the south gate, which had the same appearance and structure as the north gate. The north gate is where the prisoners were brought in and the food was brought in. The south gate is where the dead were carried out. They were carried off to an area to the right where there was a large lean-to type structure called the dead house. That's where they were registered and then transported to the cemetery. As we arrive at the gates, these two massive gates would have been opened, and then the group of 90 would enter into it. This enclosure was used for security control, so that later on, when the huge numbers that were here, there wouldn't be any attempt of mass escape by charging the gate. Coming into the enclosure, we'll look up and we'll see guard towers, which were called pigeon roosts by the prisoners. And then the large gates were closed behind them. I'll go ahead and close this one. There was a small gate built within the big one in order to allow individuals and not large groups to have access. But within this area, again, the gates were closed. Prisoners were brought in, at which point the inner gates were opened. And the prisoners were brought into Andersonville Prison, Camp Sumter, where so many would perish.